Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shift Happens podcast. Here each week, we sit down with senior leaders from across industries to uncover the real stories about managing change. From breakthrough wins to tough lessons learned, we dive deep into what it really takes to lead through uncertainty. So, whether you're a leader going through transformation or just love a good story about disruption, strategy, and resilience, you are in the right place. Because when shift happens, great leaders rise. Before we dive into the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Are you a leader navigating constant change and your team is looking to you for answers you don't have yet? The Change Leader program is here to help. At Tona Business, we work with leaders to turn chaos into clarity, retain your best people, and lead through disruption without losing trust, momentum, or your own sanity. So if you're facing restructuring, AI shifts, disengagement, or just need your people to rally behind you again, let's talk. Reach out or head over to tonupbusiness.com to find out more. Today, I'm honored to welcome Allen Hankins, COO of Triumph Financial. With over 2 decades of experience across different industries like telecom, energy, satellite, streaming, and now technology and finance, Allen helped scale a startup from zero to $1 billion in revenue in just 6 years, led the launch of a streaming platform across 11 countries, and architected solutions that saved hundreds of millions in operational costs. As a former athlete, Allen brings a competitive edge to leading high-performance teams and building strategies for sustainable growth. Welcome to the Shift Happens podcast, Allen.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Camilla. It's nice to be with your audience here this afternoon.
Thank you so much for your time for being here. So, Allen, can you start a little bit talking about you, your role, your experience, your career?
Yeah. Well, I like to give a little context and how did I maybe end up in all the different industries. And I was born in London, England. And so from a very early age, I have experienced a lot of change. I moved from London to Houston, Texas at 6, and then lived in Houston for a couple years, and then moved to the middle of Kansas in a small rural town. And so lots of change very quickly. And it's always made me, think about the people that are on the outside and, how to connect with them and how to build friendships and relationships. And ultimately, that's really what business is all about. And my career has started within the CPG world as a category manager and launching new products, and got to work with a Fortune 500 company early on in that, and launched over $20 million worth of new products in my 6-7 years there. I then transitioned to a firm that was working with the company that I was working on, and it was really taking sponsorships of sports and activating those sponsorships, because billions of dollars are spent on sports sponsorships, but how do you track that and make sure that you're getting the sales out of that is a different component. And so I worked with large clients like Waste Management, Dr. Pepper, let's see, there was some other, Air Force, Shell, others that have a big presence in sporting, and how do we leverage that relationship in order to get more sales. So did that for a couple years, and then was ready to get back into the technology space. I was kind of a technology consultant in that role, but wanted to really be on the operation side. So went to work for a company called Ambit Energy, and that company grew from 0 to $1 billion in revenue over the course of 6 years, and faster than actually Google's growth. And it was a deregulation of energy. And so we took advantage of that, launched in over 50 different markets, and really became a challenger to the incumbent business. And really, how do you deliver good customer experience? How do you enable good technology platforms that can serve your clients. We also had a business model that was similar to Amway or Mary Kay that used the direct selling approach and
Mm-hmm.
used families and relationships. So that's one of the reasons why I think we grew so quickly. I did that for about 6 years and then was about ready to have a child, and I was working a lot. And somebody had asked me if I wanted to come to work for AT&T within what was similar to their Bell Labs and really a think tank to try new business ventures. And there we were trying to get switched Ethernet and VPN, other services down from 120 to 180 days to within 30 days. And so we built out a proof of concept to do that through an API gateway. We were in the process, we worked with Salesforce. We actually presented at Salesforce Dreamforce, and we were actually in the process of beginning to integrate back within the big AT&T mothership. And we were working through fallout or challenges with the API. And at that point, my boss left to go to DirecTV, and he pulled me along with him. And it was a really fun time as DirecTV, as you may know, was bought by AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
We also looked at moving from a satellite, which was about 600 billion or 600 million, sorry, in revenue, send up a new satellite. They have a shelf life of about 15 to 20 years. Well, broadband, as you know, down in Latin America has grown exponentially. So now over 80% distribution of broadband in that territory. And so it became more cost effective to do streaming. And so got to launch DirecTV Go and scaled that out to 11 different countries, built integrations with HBO, Disney, others. It was really a fun time and really getting to scale that up to the 14 million clients that we worked with. So that's a little bit. I'm now at Triumph Financial. I get to work in the space of transportation, which is about a $450 billion space. It's ripe for transformation. As we all know, when COVID hit early, there was lots of disruption, whether it's toilet paper or water.
Mm-hmm.
We all felt vulnerable because our supply chain logistics weren't working maybe the way that we desired them to. And we operate on the financial side, which is making payments, and I lead a group of product development as well as operational teams in order to serve that space and get the great pleasure to work alongside the team.
Yeah, it's an impressive background that you have, the experience, and how fast you're able to transform businesses to grow and with, at impressive revenues. So yes, it's very nice in very different industries. So I wonder how much you learn from all of that. And thinking about that, would you share any impactful experience you had as you were leading change in any of these
Yeah,
situations?
I think there was a couple circumstances that come to mind. One, I'm a big learner, and so that's probably my top strength. If I take the Strengths Finder, I highly recommend that. Better knowing what your strengths are as well as what your weaknesses are, not to focus on
True.
your weaknesses, but to focus on your strengths. But learner is something I get bored maybe easily is one way to put it. And I don't know if that's the reason why I've ended up in different businesses or if it's something else. But I would say I was working at DirecTV, and first job that I had there, it was really taking the old satellite business and moving from a satellite to the streaming television, which meant we were changing our sales channel from telesales to distribution to e-commerce. And I was working a lot, I mean, probably 80 to 100 hours a week as we were trying to prove out this business case for the streaming television. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the CEO, Estanis, who was also a São Paulo, Brazil leader, called me on a weekend, which was surprising anytime a CEO calls you on the weekend for obvious reasons. But he just said,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I know this is a big project, and I just want to let you know that I'm in this with you. Whatever you need, you have a direct line to me. And if you need any assistance or if there's any issues, feel free to call me. Here's my personal phone number." And
Wow.
that was very early on in the journey. It went, it obviously took 14 months. One of our projects, the bigger program was over several years. But to know that you've got a CEO that is thinking about you, cares about you, and is in the boat with you, like a lot of people say that they're with you. Um, and you really find out when things get difficult if they're with you or not. Uh,
True.
and it also required a lot of investment in order to do some of the changes that we needed, which,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we proved out the business case and were true to what we said we were going to do, he
Mm-hmm.
was willing to put forward the amount of money that we required. And so I would say I always think about change as, it's got to start at the top. He is one of the most inspirational leaders that I've ever known. And
Mm-hmm.
he's somebody that I want to emulate. And yes, was there lots of good technical and transformational change stories within that? But I think that
Mm-hmm.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the leadership that really helped facilitate the change.
Yes, that's so true. And I wonder when you think about that example with this CEO that you said is one of the most inspirational CEOs that you work with. So, what else did you see in him and his behavior that would motivate or inspire you during this transformation? You said the support. He took a time and called you to make
Yeah.
sure that he was with you.
Yeah.
Any other
Yeah, I think
thing?
it started with a phone call, but it was also he made himself available. So his communication was consistent. One of
Mm-hmm.
the things that, whether you read Who Moved My Cheese or Leading Change, Kotler's a great resource. He always says that communication is maybe the easiest, but it's also the hardest. And
Mm-hmm.
repeating things over and over again. In this example, we had three groups. We had a US group that spoke English. We had a Portuguese group that spoke or Brazilian group that spoke Portuguese, and we had a Spanish
Mm-hmm.
speaking group in Argentina, which, as you know, as a Brazilian and Argentines maybe don't just not see eye to eye on the football field, but potentially have a different lens of the way that they see the world. And so
Yes.
one of the first things that we had to do was address what language are we going to communicate in? And he was very intentional about saying, hey, we're going to speak in English. Thankfully, that worked out. I probably stayed with the company a little bit longer because that was the path. Had it been Portuguese or Spanish, I'm not sure that we would have. But I think the intentionality to say so that there isn't a break in the language that we use. And I use that often today, like the language that we use within business, different teams use different words that mean sometimes the same things, sometimes they mean different things. But I think communication is a big piece. He was really intentional. He also architected the values that we wanted to embody as a group. If we win as a
Mm-hmm.
team or lose as a team, we will lose together. It is not one person's fault if they happen to make a mistake. It's all of our faults, and we're going to look out for
Mm-hmm.
each other. And so he was very intentional about communication. He was also very intentional about the values that we would achieve as a group. And then I think he set up regular cadences to help people to be accountable. Accountability is sometimes viewed as a bad thing, but in the case of Weight Watchers, it helps us to accomplish something that maybe we couldn't do without other people helping us to be accountable to a bigger
Mm-hmm.
goal or changing to be something that we aren't today. And I think, previously I mentioned a quote I read, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and he says that when man is challenged with a situation, he's challenged to not just become something else, but to become something greater himself. And so I think you're put into situations, you're put into platforms that you have the opportunity to step up. And as a parent, you many people can relate to this. I talk to
Mm-hmm.
my kids as adults. I don't talk to them as babies. And maybe there's some bad philosophy there from a parenting perspective, but I believe that most people want to live up to it. And he set a high bar for us, but he also walked that journey along with us, and he was never afraid to get into the weeds and help us with whatever issues that we're dealing with. If there was a contract that needed to be signed, he would get that done, when we asked him to get that done. So he was really a leader who removed obstacles and was a servant leader. And I think that, is easy to say today, but it's harder to do, especially when you're leading a group of, 5 to 10,000 people.
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. I like the word servant leader. I mean, it has been used for so many years, but yeah, as you said, it's easy to say, but really to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes intentionality and a big purpose as a leader to do that. And yes, it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it.
Yeah.
I, yeah, I agree. And by the way, I need to tell you the Strengths Finder. I did a Strengths Finder, and my number one is learner.
Yeah. Nice.
Yes.
That's
The
why
two
we
is
get along.
communication. The third is strategies. This is my top three. They just drive me for everything. Yes, I love it. And one of the reasons, by the way, I started the podcast was also that, because you learn every day. Such, with experts like you, so much wisdom coming from you all executives and, with all this beautiful experience. So yes, I'm always learning a lot with this. Yeah.
I love
Thank you, by the way.
it.
All right. So, in doing this experience that you had, did you have a chance to be part of something that didn't work the way you expected? I mean, anything maybe didn't go right or adjustments you had to do? Any story that you like to share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of little things that you could always point to. I think one of the biggest things that I would point to is we had a vendor early on that was identified as problematic, and they were one of our main vendors to help us do the streaming television. And they were a multi-tenant vendor, so they not only served us, but they served many other, and our priorities sometimes were not their priorities. And so getting those things expedited was sometimes hard.
Mm-hmm.
The so I would say one of the challenges that we came to is we really got to a stall point in our sales or new sales because we were in growth mode, but we also had some churn in the platform. As always, people are buying and for a specific event, football event, and then they leave. Well, we knew that we needed to make some changes in order to help build a better capability to get new features to market quicker. And so part of that
Mm-hmm.
was taking that development in-house. And that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the biggest challenges. It was literally a 14-month process that we started down. And in the middle of that, I lost one of my principal architects. And the good news is that if you have good people, good process, and you have a good vision, then a lot of the people, whether they come or go, will sustain, or you'll be able to continue to move things forward. And I really saw the benefit of having good people, good process, and a great vision. But I would say it was not easy, and we already had probably a couple years of people on 10 different platforms, from Apple TV to Samsung to Roku. And as you can imagine, when you're rolling out a new platform, you don't want to disrupt the customers that are on that platform. And so
Mhm.
it took us a long time to really not only move the back end video transcoding, encoding, digital rights management, metadata in the data catalog or VOD catalog. We
Mhm.
moved all of that from the US down to Brazil,
Okay.
and we had to set up a new team. And that was all challenging because we had to spin up many different new vendors, whether it's AWS for their encoding, elemental encoding. And so there was a ton of challenges, but I would say that, 14 months later, what started as a problem that we couldn't serve our customers the way that we wanted to, ultimately became what not only saved our company, but also helped us to better serve our customers because we were willing to act. And sometimes, I think it's Teddy Roosevelt that says the best thing to do in war is to make the right decision. The second best decision in war is to make the wrong decision. The worst decision is to make no decision. And it was a difficult decision because you've got millions of people that would be potentially impacted. It was a big cost. It was going to take us over a year to get it delivered, but
Mhm.
we were invested in delivering for our customers. And so, and then I would say today that if that had not happened, AT&T later sold DirecTV, as you're well aware. And then they broke up the divisions. The US went to TPG, the Latin America division went to a group in Argentina, an investment firm. Had that not happened, that service may not be around because it was very expensive. And so retrospectively, looking back, it was a hard decision to make. It was a
Mhm.
painful decision to make, but it proved out beneficial not only for the company, but for our customers and for the long-term viability of the team that supports that.
Mhm. That sounds to me a good learning as well. As you know, I listen to your story is because you stick with certain values and certain things, like for example, the customer first, and some uh, big things that are important, some pillars, you stick with it, and then you make the decision, a big strategy behind and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Also to tell the story and to understand, to explain to people that are involved with the change why we are doing that, right? And talking a little bit about that, would you have any advice when you explain the why or when you communicate to people that are highly impacted or involved in a change?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's always smart to start with the why. And revenue is certainly a big motivator in business. Cost savings is another big motivator, but
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately long-term viability, it's customer experience. And if you look at, you know, lots of different data points that are out there, there's customer experience leaders outperform laggards by almost 80%. And yet out of the 300 plus firms that have been surveyed, only 80% thought they delivered superior experience, but only 8% actually do. That comes from Bain. And so I think, and just to make sure that I'm not too high, or my thoughts are not too ungrounded, that I
Mm-hmm.
think we all know what good customer experience is when we see it, when we feel it. But there's also good reason for both the employees as well as the bottom line. If you keep good customers with you, you don't have to continue to chase after the people that churn. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it may be the details, but I think a lot of it is grounded in data. And so one of the things that I like to do, there's a there's a model Bain has that's an inner loop or outer loop. And an inner loop is trying to understand what are customers saying real time and build the feedback mechanism to listen to those customers. And
Mm-hmm.
then if there are some systemic issues, then you would push that into the product development to solve from a systemic standpoint so that you can begin to have a voice of the customer that is truly driving your roadmap. And you've got lots of places, whether it's Apple or Android store, that are giving you feedback. And on one hand, sometimes a negative rating will bother you, but on the other hand, it's, as I had an old boss that said, feedback is a gift, positive or negative.
Yes.
You can take that and you can turn it into something really powerful if you listen, but it requires listening and actioning that in order to make the improvements that you want. So,
Mm-hmm. As you talk about that, I'm curious. Normally, when you hear the voice of the customer, there are different ways and channels to do that, right? I mean, it could be through surveys. How do you normally gather this data? Do you have any platform or any advice to get this data to
yeah,
compile and get into the conclusions?
I mean, unless you are working with some large clients, I won't tell you particular platforms, but there's a ton of
Of
feedback
course.
mechanisms. And,
Uh-huh.
whether it's surveys or, call center, that you have feedback from your call center representatives. It's also people that leave your platform and you put in a reason code as to why are people leaving. Is it price? Is it content?
Mm-hmm.
Is it? And so I think there is no silver bullet here. It's really orchestrating at whatever different touch point that the customers may interact with you, an ability for them to give you real-time feedback. Now,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people do that. What a lot of people don't do is they don't action that feedback. It may sit in a survey platform, or maybe even worse, they get it, but they don't do anything with it.
Don't
And
do anything.
so I think the challenge for all of us is that if we're going to ask for feedback, that we have to action it. And so one of the things that I did from just very tactical. Some may say it's strategic, but I had a weekly meeting with the product development team, which included both product as well as engineers, as well as our
Mm-hmm.
customer service team.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what are the biggest issues that you're hearing about? And looking at all that data on a collective basis. And we would think about real time every week, what are we going to prioritize? Because we can't not do anything with this information. Otherwise, it's pointless to collect it.
Hmm.
So I think that's something tactically that you can do. And it's also across different business units. You're using the data to tear down the silos to create a single purpose as to why do you exist? And you exist to serve the customer. Otherwise, like Sam Walton said, the customer is the CEO. Ultimately, they determine where they're going to spend their money. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you want to remind yourself of on a daily basis. Otherwise, it won't be long before you don't have a customer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Alan. I was actually talking to a potential client this week, and we ended up talking about that and about best practices. So, as you were saying, around mentioning about customer service, I wonder, yeah, what kind of advice you have, because sometimes the feedback is gathered like once a year. And yes, and as you're saying, you have this routine, right, every week to get the feedback and do something with it. I mean, it just makes it so much agile, right?
Yeah.
And the client can see you doing something, right?
Yeah.
Because is right away, is almost immediate, right? You take actions and you communicate the actions as well. Um, and it's interesting also, you say that people sometimes sit on the data and don't do anything. And yes, I've seen companies doing that. And sometimes a lot is related to the fact that it's hard to get that negative feedback.
Yeah.
It's hard to face and communicate. You got a hard feedback and then you do something with it. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
ego, other things, right?
I'll say one last thing about the topic is, if you have people that are working for a company and you know that there's issues and you're not doing anything to address the issues, that
Mm-hmm.
begins also to deteriorate the engagement from the employees. You know,
Exactly.
we all know that one of the biggest problems or challenges today is that, I don't know, 70% of the workers are not engaged. And
Mm-hmm.
so you got to ask yourself, why is that? And I think part of it is that people that are on the front lines have one of the hardest jobs that there is. And they're, to use your words, they're accepting the difficult feedback, but they're not giving the tools or the ability to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Change is saying, hey, how do I address this? And then close the loop to go back to the customer and say, hey, we actually have a solve for that. And it's coming in a week, or it's coming in a month, or maybe coming in 3 months or 6 months, but do something with it. And
You're
so
addressing.
that
Yes.
begins to help with the leadership or the employee experience, which, if you got happy employees, that's going to turn into great customer experience. If you have great customer experience, that's going to increase your revenue. And so there's a leadership perspective to this that it just makes good business sense to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agreed. That's great. And you mentioned to me, and I need to bring it because I love it, around the integrated customer experience. If you want to
Yeah.
talk more about that, because I think it's very, very good insights. You bring in statistics, as you are mentioning some of these
Yeah.
statistics right now. This is so powerful because sometimes people, I mean, take for granted, and I mean, and don't invest. I mean, even when you mention about the leadership development, can you talk a little bit more about that? It's so powerful, Alan.
Yeah. Well, this started actually worked with an individual at AT&T who was a data scientist, and we mapped all of our issues from a customer's perspective to how likely they would churn or leave us. And you know, that is a lag metric, right? Lag metric is they've left. So we wanted to create some predictive analytics, or what was the R square, the correlation between an issue and them leaving. And
Mhm.
we built out a dashboard of about 68 different attributes, and we correlated that. Being closer to one was more likely that they would attrit, and we solved the highest likelihood of those problems to the attrition, and we begin to see a drastic improvement in our retention, which obviously leads to a better revenue or return on investment. So then we could say, okay, well, this is how we're actually going to fund this program. And what we began to see is that the customer experience would increase the revenue by obviously keeping customers on the platform. But we also didn't expect this. We also saw an increase in employee engagement. And so we did, at the time, it was Gallup surveys, there's a Pulse survey, and people get excited when you say, hey, here's the problem, and here's how we're going to address the problem. And so that really gives everybody a higher value of what they're doing really matters, and that everything is mapped to that.
Mhm.
Which then we began to see, thankfully, the company I worked for invested millions and millions of dollars in leadership development. So that we began to say, okay, well, how do we bring in these metrics to a leadership development perspective so that they would have a clear line of sight on taking that mindset and helping to not just drive the revenue, which was the end goal, but driving a better customer experience, which then would also improve the employee experience. And so I call it as you said, the integrated customer experience, which is focus on good leadership, which then drives employee engagement, which then improves the customer experience, which in the end we know is going to improve revenue. I think it's also the right thing to do, businesses have a value in this world, and one of the greatest gifts that we have is the people that we get to serve, who are our customers. And so we get to listen to them, and if we action that appropriately, then we have a great relationship, and they're going to stay with us for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What I love the most about that is, I mean, this correlation. I mean, first time I see something like that, right, Alan? But not only that, you bring data to prove your point. Because sometimes you see, like when, companies go through hard times, which it happens, right?
Yeah.
And then, oh, let's cut some costs here and there. Leadership training is one of the things that normally get cut earlier in this process.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the impact, oh, we don't see the impact right away, we don't have that data, but once you see data and how important it is, those elements for your revenue, is basically brings this support about, okay, that's worth it. Let's not cut that right now.
Yeah.
Let's think about other things. Let's be creative, but let's keep investing on the people, because they will ultimately bring the revenue to
That's
home,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
And decisions, I tell my kids every day that you get to choose your decisions, but you do not get to choose your consequences. Good decisions have good consequences, and bad decisions or less good decisions have bad consequences. And so, if it's simple to say that to your kids. It's difficult sometimes to get people to understand that every decision has a impact.
mm-hmm.
Whether that's positive or negative, or maybe it's sometimes very, very infrequently, it's neutral.
Yes, I love it. I'm going to use that for mine too. I mean, we
Well,
talk a
hopefully it
lot
works
about
better for you.
decisions, but I never worded in terms of you don't choose the consequences. I mean, I like the way you were saying. So yes, taking here for my daughter later today. Good. So shifting gears a little bit, Alan, let's think about the future. What's your vision about, in your industry in the next 5 years, and what does it take to get there to be successful in the future?
Yeah, well, I won't go too much into our quarterly report, but we want to enable the transformation or the transportation field to get paid on time, and nights, weekends, when they're away from their family, they need a place to stay. That has been in the past a very difficult uh, problem, because you have
Mhm.
uh, a payor and a payee that it may have a bill of lading that's sent to you via email or fax. And so sometimes there can be fraud in this space. And what
Mhm.
we're doing is we're automating that through Triumph Financial. We're automating those transactions. And then we've also created the technology to auto decision and auto pay those clients. And we've got a mechanism, or payment rails that runs outside of the Fed, similar to Venmo, that can pay them and distribute the money to them real time, whether that's
Mhm.
a night or a weekend, so that they can get home and they can take care of their family the way that they intend, as well as removing fraud from the transaction. And then,
Mhm.
we also are, obviously we do about $50 billion worth of payments in the transportation space, which is a little bit over 10%. But there's a lot of opportunity to grow, and both over, not just over the road, but different modalities. Internationally, we've set up Mexican pesos. This year we launched that capability. So there's a big market that, about $2 trillion if you look at all modalities, and if you look at international market. And so we
Mhm.
want to transact confidently. That's our kind of our benchmark. We want to give people the ability to transact through their financial systems confidently that they get the money to the right place, at the right time, at the right person. I'm really excited that we've got a it's similar to Venmo. It's uh, an application called Load Pay that is enabling this, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really one of a kind in the transportation space that is giving drivers as well as fleets the ability to access their payments. And then we do supply chain, you know, financials. And so we want to be the industry expert, taking fraud out of this space and enabling that group. We do also have a big vision also to use that data in a way that can better serve them, to price loads, to uh, you know, understand who's running well, who's not running well, and have a score of what that is. So we intend to have more coming in the future that is going to better enable those transportation clients to use the data that we already have. And so we're excited about the future. We've got a great sweet spot. We are a bank, we're FDIC insured, and so we bring a lot of the regulatory and compliance background to an industry that, as you know, has been ripe with fraud, and we're trying to do what MasterCard and Visa did, 50 years ago. And so we're super excited about that.
Wow, sounds like a huge project.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes, I can see all the benefits, and I was not aware when you shared with me first time around the frauds and things like that in that kind of transaction or environment, right? So, I'm very happy that you're able to address that
Yeah.
issue. So, nice. So, if I wrap up and think about all the great things you shared with me today, Alan, you mentioned around the values to look out for people. When you mentioned about inspirational leader, you mentioned about communication, communicate more. You mentioned about the simple things like establishing one language to communicate between different countries, right, and cultures. Servant leadership and accountability, consistency, so many great things. You mentioned about the integrated customer experience. So if I would wrap up and just take a few things that you like for the audience to, take from this conversation, what would you say?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I would say all of those are table stakes to being successful. But I think the one thing that, if I'm talking to my kids, or if I'm talking to a new employee, or I'm talking to even a leader, is that the one thing that you can focus on in order to ensure that your success, and that may not show up as big or bright as revenue, but is to be a man or a woman of integrity. Have
Mhm.
character. I worked with a CEO at AT&T, and obviously there's 200,000 employees that work at AT&T, and he said this. He said, Alan, the amount of people that do what they say they are going to do is very few. Less than
Mm,
5% of the people actually follow through on what they say they're going to do and actually do it. And so that really was surprising to me, number one, because I
mm,
thought everybody operated under this idea that if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. And I
mhm,
know that is going to cost me at times. Like, it may cost me some sleep, it may cost me some, hey, I got to get this done when I said I was going to get it done. And so I think that's, to me, and especially if I want to be a leader, that I
mhm.
am true to who I say that I want to be. That's the foundation that you build any success upon. If you don't have that, it doesn't really matter if you have success or not, because it's going to be, I think, a house that's built on sand. And so
Yes.
I want to build a house that's on a firm foundation, a rock. And in order to do that, I have to be honest, and I have to have the integrity to say if I can't do something, that I can't do it. Or if it's going to take me longer to do something, that I would have that honest conversation up front. And I wouldn't let somebody just be disappointed later when I didn't hit the date that I said that I was going to. So I think that is probably the biggest thing. It's not something, as you know, they teach in school. However, it to me is the foundation of all success. And I think, there's other things, like there's a lot of people that talk. I think I want to be a
Mhm.
person that listens, and
Mhm.
there's got to be a humility that drives that,
Mhm.
and then all the other things, the vision, the discipline to do things when it's hard or you don't feel like doing it, the resilience, the grit, the customer experience, all those things are secondary, if you will, to helping to become the man or woman that you've been created to be. And I love there's a book, Banker to the Poor. It's a Nobel 2006 Nobel Peace Prize winner. His name's
Mhm.
Mohammed Yunus, and he came up with the Grameen Bank, which was really microfinance. And he says people should wake up in the morning and say, "I am not a job seeker. I'm a job creator." And that there are many people that are entrepreneurs, but many don't have the opportunity to ever find that out. And so be a man of character, be a man of integrity, be a man that creates other opportunities for your people. And, I think early on in my career, I wrestled in college and I wanted to win. But if I show other people how to succeed long term and give them a platform to succeed, that is what true, I think, leadership and success is really about, is building others up and helping them to be successful.
Mhm. That's a great way to end the show today. Well, thank you. And I can tell you read many books because from the conversation that we had before in this podcast, I think you mentioned 4 or 5 books. Wow. I mean, and I took notes of all of them because I love reading. I wish I
Yeah.
had more time after being a mom. I just don't have so much time, but thank you. All such great advice. And yes, the integrity and the character as foundation is so important, and it's really the key. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And I think as leaders and as parents, that's what we try to communicate to the people, right? Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. I do appreciate your time and your wisdom today, and thank you for my audience, and see you next time in Shift Happens podcast.
Thank you.